Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final keynote speaker at ProfCon. We're so excited to have Rafic Sinno here. A little background on Rafic. He's Assistant Professor of Marketing and Assistant Department Chair of Business Administration at the University of Dubuque. And he's actually soon going to be transitioning into the department chair. His teaching emphasizes an interdisciplinary approach in helping students discover and develop their proficiency in the marketing and communication fields. Rafic received the Faculty Member of the Year Award in 2017. He co-founded Sinno Communication and co-authored 3 market-leading books with his father, Dr. Abdul K. Sinno. He received a bachelor's degree in communication from Clark University and an MBA from the University of Dubuque. And he's talking about EQ strategies for the classroom. And anyone who's met Rafic knows this is a topic that I think he's particularly skilled in and is just going to do an excellent job. So let's turn the time over to Rafic.
Well, thank you, Rochelle, and hello, ProfCon. Hello, everyone. How are you today? I hope everyone is doing well. It's been a great conference so far. Lots of wonderful insights, great speakers. Thank you all for bringing your passion and your energy and your connectivity to this conference. I think in this world, we need to be more and more connected, and having a community like this is just phenomenal to be a part of, and to have just this online experience is wonderful. So today I wanted to discuss with you emotional intelligence. I got into the field of emotional intelligence 5 years ago. And when I first ran across the entire topic, I thought emotional intelligence, well, we cover that in marketing, we talk about it in communication, but I really didn't do a deep dive into it on an interpersonal level. And so when I started to further investigate emotional intelligence, I saw it as a tool to develop not only myself, but also my students as well. And it's with this perspective that I want to go ahead and share with you about the topic of emotional intelligence. So let's get started. Is everyone ready? Yes? All right. Well, we'll get started here and let's go for it. All right. So our agenda for today, first of all, I want to give you some background about emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? Where did it come from? How did it grow? And then next, we'll be talking about why it's so important for us as professors and for our students. And then finally, we'll talk about some emotional intelligence strategies for the classroom. And then last but not least, at the very end of this presentation, I also have resources where you can further explore emotional intelligence. Okay, I am ready. Are you guys ready? Let's go for it. Here we go. All right, so the question is, what is EQ? And just to kind of have a definition right here, first of all, this particular concept came around in 1990, and Peter Salovey and John D. Mayer were the principal educators and researchers that put together a framework for this particular concept. And then David R. Caruso was also working with them too and helped develop an assessment for emotional intelligence. So we talk about IQ, is we're able to measure your IQ. Same thing here, there's different ways to measure EQ as well. And we'll get to the measurements a little bit later in the presentation. But for at this point right now, just to have a working definition of it right here, and we can see how Peter has really structured this and John has really structured this, is emotional intelligence includes the ability to engage in sophisticated information processing about, and this is critical, one's own and others' emotions, and the ability to use this information as a guide to thinking and behavior. So it's able to look at your emotions and then to be able to say, how can I use my emotions to really create great relationships with others, right? How can I be there to relate with them? How can I be there to empathize with them, right? And how can I manage my emotional response, okay? And they continue to say this, that is individuals high in emotional intelligence pay attention to, use, understand, and manage their emotions. And these skills serve adaptive functions to potentially benefit themselves and others. And so this is a pretty powerful concept. And thus in 1990, the whole concept came about with emotional intelligence, and Peter Salovey and John D. Mayer really introduced this concept. Now, the concept really didn't get popular until a little later, where we have Daniel Goleman. In 1995, he released his blockbuster book, Emotional Intelligence. And it was on the New York Times bestseller list, had sold 5 million copies worldwide, translated into 30 different languages. And the whole concept of EQ, or as actually Daniel Goleman now likes to refer to it, EI, really became a popular concept. But Daniel Goleman took the initial definition from Peter Salovey and John D. Mayer and then kind of expanded upon it. And what he said is that emotional intelligence really comes down to specific competencies, and they range across 4 different areas. And we'll be exploring these 4 different areas in the presentation today. So one is self-awareness, being aware of yourself, your emotions, your dispositions, your thinking, your thoughts toward things, and how you react and behave. Self-management as well, being able to manage yourself in certain situations and being able to manage your emotional responses. Now, the other side, and if we can imagine like a line going right through the middle of these, it deals with how you relate with others. So one is having empathy and social awareness, being aware of how other people feel about things, and then being able to manage your relationships with others as well. And what he says is nested within these 4 big, broad areas are learned competencies that help us become better leaders and sets performers apart from the average. Okay, so let's discuss then here why I'm so excited about this. The central point is emotional intelligence can be developed. You can develop your emotional intelligence. You can become more self-aware. You can better manage yourself. You can become more socially aware, right? And you can manage your relationships as well. And that's the beauty about emotional intelligence, is that can be developed over a period of time, right? More and more. IQ, we say it's a measure of intelligence. And based on the literature that you read, people say is rather fixed at a certain point in time, right? That's it. That's what you have. But EQ, the potential is unlimited, right? And that's what's beautiful about this. And the one other concept I wanted to share too is that if you probably look at me, you probably say, oh, wow, well, Rafic looks like an extrovert, right? He has no problem with emotional intelligence, right? He's just out there. Well, the truth is I'm more of an ambivert, but it doesn't matter where you are on the scale, whether you're an introvert, you're an extrovert, you're an ambivert, it doesn't matter where you are, because emotional intelligence you can develop. We all have feelings of sadness. We all get angry. We all get annoyed, right? And regardless of our personality. So this happens across the board, regardless of personality. So it's distinct from personality itself. Okay. All right. So the question is, why EQ? Why emotional intelligence? Why are we talking about this? What's the point behind it? Well, let me give some context here, right? So as a professor, you wear many different hats, and yes, this is the emoji right from my iPhone right here, because we talk in the language of emojis. So, but you're a researcher, you're a coach, you're a teacher, you're an influencer, you're a colleague, right? And on top of these things, you're also a dad, you're a mom, you're a brother, you're a sister, you're an aunt, you're an uncle, you're right. Perhaps you're an Olympic hopeful. So all of these things we play these different roles, and these different roles have demands on us, correct? And these demands create emotional responses. As a dad, I'm filled with pride sometimes. Sometimes I'm scared about what my son is about to do, and I have to have the proper emotional response. Same thing with students, right? We look after our students, we love our students, and we want them to become the very best that we can be. And sometimes that takes patience on our side, right? We have to scale back ourselves in order to help them grow and develop the way they're supposed to. So what's kind of interesting about this is uh, our our esteemed colleague Dr. Scott Cowley. I follow Dr. Cowley on Twitter, and I love his tweets. And one day he posted this, and I was putting together my presentation, and I was looking for some great examples, and I was like, oh my, this hits it right on, right? This speaks to the essence of emotional intelligence. And in that tweet, he says, roller coaster of a day, relative going on hospice, another relative found work after long unemployment, a student left our program, a professor in Europe told me her class loved 3 of my class projects, a student cried in my office, let myself get riled by another professor. It's just amazing the level of emotion that Dr. Cowley experienced through all of these events, right? So life's challenges and demands create emotional responses, and we have to be able to regulate ourselves and choose to be present in the moment and to be the best of ourselves in the moment. And that's really speaking to the essence of emotional intelligence. Now, in addition to that, these type of situations are challenges, right? There are challenges, there are setbacks, and there are opportunities, and you and your students face these opportunities. And in this day and age, especially with uncertainty, with not knowing what's going on, we need to find a way to be the most productive and the most effective that we can be, to make the most of our potential and the opportunities that we have. And that requires a lot of self-management, right? A lot of inner reflection and a steady pace. And that's what emotional intelligence allows. So if you look at the headlines, we face a barrage of issues, right? These are the national issues. I have this on my Google feed, and I see the news headlines. I'm sure you guys see the news headlines, right? The national issues that we face are very serious issues that we contend with, and they create a lot of emotional responses. And then if you look also just locally, so this is my national issues here, we have, of course, George Floyd, which created a lot of emotional response and concern within our society, correct? We have politics coming into play and so forth. There's so much there that we respond to and our students respond to as well. And then for myself, there's local issues, right? And we're talking about COVID-19 cases, and we're talking about the second wave of them coming through and so forth. And so we see these headlines, and it impacts us, right? It impacts our psyche, it impacts our mindset, it impacts what we look forward to. And that also has a tremendous impact on our students. And what you can do is you can't really offer like an answer in these cases, right? And one of my students, I asked him if I could use this particular Facebook post that he made, because I felt it really spoke to the whole entire essence of emotional intelligence. And he said, you know, this year, especially everything that's gone on has been extremely overwhelming. The world can really suck sometimes, and it feels like everything just kind of closes in and you can't do anything about it. That being said, we're all in this together. So, and this is the emotionally intelligent response here. If anybody needs to just talk about literally anything, vent, or whatever else, feel free to send a message or call. I can't promise I can help, but I can promise to listen to whatever you need to say. And perhaps as instructors, you know, students come to you for answers. And really, we don't necessarily have answers in this day and age. We have approaches, we have ways of listening in, and we have ways of relating with our students, right? But there's no one who has a definitive answer per se. And the answer you provide may not be necessarily the right answer for your student. So we need to be emotionally intelligent and be able to relate with our students and be able to facilitate our students to find the solutions that are right for them and to find a way to make it through all of this. All right. So in this particular case too, we see some industry shifts. Our industry is changing, definitely changing. It has changed this semester for sure as we transitioned into online classes. And as academics, we see headlines like this from the Chronicle of Higher Education, in this particular case, the University of Alaska, to eliminate 40 academic programs, right? And I teach at a private university myself. We're a smaller university. And so, of course, there's concerns about what the future will look like for higher education. And there's going to be a lot of shifts in that particular area of development. And we have to be ready for those shifts and adapt to those shifts. And we may not like some of the changes as well. In light of this right here, we look at other industry shifts as well. What's developing within the industry? And I want to give a shout out to Lydia Shah, who made this presentation at the last Duke and Digital Summit. And she presented a report from Microsoft's Vision Report that showed the top soft skills and the top hard skills that are required from students. And it's an excellent presentation. I've made a link to it. So if you want some further context and reference for it, I highly recommend you watch it. But one of the things that I think we focus on quite a bit is we focus on these hard skills. And what we really need to do is also focus on the soft skills. So yes, the hard skills get our students in the door, but the soft skills keep them there. And the soft skills require a lot of emotional intelligence, because if you think about creativity, sometimes we're fearful. Fear is an emotion. We're fearful of presenting an idea that's different from everyone else's idea, right? We're fearful of doing that sometimes, correct? We sometimes don't know how to empathize with others as well. So we need to develop and cultivate those type of skills. And I'll be sharing some ideas later on in the presentation about that, correct? And the ability to adapt and be resilient also requires emotional intelligence. So all of these aspects right here, these soft skills, we also need to emphasize. And I further researched this and got some further context about this. And what I have seen is a development here. And this is from Microsoft's education blog. And what they say here is what's very interesting is the class of 2030, which is a new paper from Microsoft and McKinsey Consulting, as you know, found that as manual occupations enter their death spiral, 30 to 40% of future jobs will depend on social emotional skills. And the curriculum of future schools will focus not so much on the facts, which can be easily found on a phone, but on skills. But it also further went into elaborating on this point. And the most important skills will be the soft skills, the empathetic, personal ways of interaction that sets humans apart from digital entities. So this is the interesting aspect of it here. Are we developing those type of skills in our classrooms, and how can we develop those type of skills in our classroom? And so I wanted to delve into this more with the framework I presented earlier from Daniel Goleman, and kind of use that as a framework to talk about emotional intelligence, to get your feet wet and introduce you to the concepts, and then to further delve into some examples behind them. Okay, so everyone ready? Thumbs up. Good to go. All right, let's go for it. Awesome. Okay, here we go. So how can you develop this? Okay, and these are EQ strategies for the classroom, and we'll take a look at it from the teacher's perspective and also from the student's perspective. So from both of these perspectives. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and discuss this further. All right, so we're going to look at this core component. So we look at the first one we're going to start with is self-awareness. And then we're going to look at self-management, social awareness, and social management. And we'll define each of these and give examples of them. All right, so let's talk about self-awareness. So self-awareness is the ability to recognize and identify how you feel. Now, there are many different strategies we can employ to become more self-aware. In this particular presentation, I'm going to give you a couple examples to go on, or strategies to use that you can reflect on to become more self-aware and to actually help students become more self-aware. All right, so let's go ahead and discuss those. So let me ask you, if somebody were to ask you, how do you feel? How would you reply? Anyone in the chat? Let me know. How would you reply? Okay, I see. I feel great. Pretty good. Meh. Fine. Great, terrific, awesome, energized, great, inspired. I am well. I feel fabulous. Woohoo! Okay, wonderful. Feel intrigued. Okay, excited to be here. Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Awesome. Thank you guys. All right. So drained, and I'm so glad. Like, I'm so glad I'm getting a variance of responses here, because sometimes we put forth we put forth what we want to project, not necessarily how we actually feel. So, like, for example, if I feel drained, you might ask me, "Hey, how you feeling today, Rafiq?" Oh, fine. But really inside, I'm feeling drained, right? And we don't have that safe space to really tell people how we actually feel. So how we feel, and on the language of emojis right here kind of dictate how we actually feel, right? Like, this is the common language that we use when it comes to social media, and we use these emojis to communicate our feelings. Sometimes it's easier for my students to actually communicate how they feel via emojis than to actually tell me how they feel face to face. But we often respond with very common type of responses, and our responses look like this: I'm tired, I'm hungry, fine. Well, what does fine mean? Okay. Well, what does okay mean exactly? Um, but we need to develop really more of an emotional vocabulary to really tell people exactly how we're feeling, correct? I can tell you, for example, I'm feeling peaceful, serene, right? A next level of that, I'm feeling joy. An extreme level of that, I'm feeling ecstasy, right? And so if you can see there, right, in the yellow area right here, those feelings, correct? And if you look at the red area, this is from Dr. Robert Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. If you look at the red area, we have annoyance. So think about being angry or mad. I'm mad. Well, mad can mean different things. Mad can mean really you're annoyed at this point, or you're pretty annoyed at this point, but you're not really to that point where you're mad, right? Or angry, or almost, well, of course, we can say in a rage. So if we think about this, if we develop the emotional vocabulary to really tell people how we are feeling, they can pinpoint exactly where we are in terms of our emotional response, correct? And we can even regulate our emotional response given how we feel. Okay. All right. So the question is then, you know, how can we tell that? And I want to do a one quick exercise. I want to do this in a creative way. Ready? Okay, guys. What color represents your day right now? If you describe using a color, you describe the way you feel. What color would that be? And if that doesn't strike you right away, you can also look at the second question: which songs would be on your playlist right now? Great. Orange, purple, green, right? Yellow. Okay, green, light blue, blue, rosy. Okay, wonderful. Green. Yes. Okay, well, wonderful. Orange, lime green, purple. Okay, great. And so, Happy by Pharaoh. I love that song. I love that song. Thank you, Karen. I love that song. Um, don't stop believing. Yes, yes. Oh God, you're right. So all of these are representing our emotions, right? They're a different way of describing like how we feel. And it's very important to get in touch with how you feel that particular day, right? And to take an introspective look at how you're feeling and how you want to regulate your emotions throughout the day and be present throughout the day. Okay, so a couple suggestions here for this section of self-awareness. Do you do check-in with the classroom? Of course, we're really great at, as professors, assigning projects, assignments, but are we tapping into how our students feel about those assignments or about those projects? For example, like we're doing the mimic simulation in class, I'll go ahead and say, how are you guys feeling about this round, right? And so some people may say, oh, well, I'm kind of a little worried, or I'm feeling a little anxious, or other people will say, yes, I'm ready. I'm looking forward to crushing it, correct? So I can kind of get a range of responses right there and kind of tap into and get into ways to help those students who are kind of struggling, right? But I ask them how they feel about it. It's oftentimes very clear what they're supposed to do, so they know the directions and everything like that, but they have some apprehension or they have some reservations, correct? I tap into that and ask them a little bit further more about it. We also want to be able to tap into their hopes and aspirations as students. You know, what do they desire to do? What do they think they're capable of doing? And sometimes, you know, I've talked to a C student who always has labeled him or herself as a C student. And I say, you know what, if you put in the hard work, you can actually become better. And it's changing that belief, that mindset. It opens them up, right? Because then they can see, well, I've always been a C student all my life. Well, maybe you haven't had the right studying strategies in place, correct? Let's work on that. Let's see how we can help you out there. So it's being able there to help them out. Okay. Now, one other aspect too, to develop more of a self-awareness here, is to actually get them to reflect on the field. So how do students feel about the digital marketing field? What is their actual feelings about it, right? What recent developments, for example, concern them? How do they feel as consumers of social platforms? Where is the value proposition there? And do they feel that it's a proper value proposition for what they get, given what they get? And then do you create a safe space for students to discuss how they truly feel? So within the classroom itself, you actually acknowledge how people feel. And so some people, like, for example, when I'm teaching internet marketing, some people don't like to be on social media at all. And they feel kind of like an outcast. They feel like they're the only one who doesn't really like to be on social media. And I actually encourage them to bring out their perspective and share with students why they do that. So one is to kind of develop that through self-reflection assignments and examples. Another way, and a great way here, and by Professor Schwartz in her Digital Summit presentation, she talked about using a digital detox for teaching digital marketing. And I think this is one of the best ideas. I have them do it actually as part of my consumer behavior class. I have them give up their favorite social media channel for 2 weeks, and they have to journal throughout those 2 weeks about their experience and how they're feeling at the time, and what they kind of come to a conclusion at the end of the experiment. And some people have decided that, you know what, I have changed the way I use social media, because social media is really a do, feel, think type of medium, right? You launch the app right away, you look for exciting content, and then you think about it afterwards. And so I get them to look at that whole aspect of it and look at their habits and how those habits are being formulated and whether or not those are positive or negative for them, or where they fall on that particular spectrum. Professor Schwartz's presentation goes in depth into how she's developed that. And I really think it's great, because to know presence, you have to know absence. You have to know absence first in order to know presence. And I think that's a central concept here of self-awareness as well. Okay, so this takes us for the self-awareness component. And what really we want to develop here is, instead of having reaction, we want to transition to reflection, right? This is where most of us are. When it comes to social media, digital marketing, we're a lot here in reaction stage. We really want to get more towards the reflection aspect within this self-awareness guidance. So this is what we hope to develop here in developing that self-awareness component. All right. Well, now that we're self-aware, how can we regulate and manage our emotions? And this is critical for you as a professor and also for your students. And this is where it really, when they can manage their emotions in a very positive way. And again, the whole emphasis is on a positive outcome. If they can do that, then they can put forth their best effort, right? And really resonate and create a connection with their audience. So now we're talking about self-management here, because now I'm aware of my emotions. Now I can manage them. But you cannot manage your emotions unless you're truly aware of them, correct? So we're going to talk about the concept here, our strategy called emotional regulation. And that's our ability to effectively manage and respond to an emotional experience. And I have a question for you, Okay, I want to see how you guys would classify yourself. Would you consider yourself, when it comes to managing your emotions, are you a thermostat or a thermometer? I'd like to see what you guys think. So are you a thermostat? In other words, can you regulate your emotional response like a thermostat in your home? Or are you a thermometer? You immediately react to whatever it is the emotional situation is. You immediately react. So like a thermometer, if it's 78 degrees outside, boom, 78 degrees. If it's 100 degrees outside, boom, right? A thermostat, you can regulate that. And I'm getting some good responses right here. And yes, and honestly, the best way to kind of really assess this is, yes, you do your own personal assessment, but ask your significant other how they would how they would classify you, because they may give you a little bit of a different insight. Um, but yeah, and as John has mentioned there, it depends, right? So in different situations, you can have different reactions. What we want to get to is to a point where we can be more of that thermostat, where we can adjust and fine tune and dial our emotional response. And so, sometimes that means dialing up the emotional response. It doesn't mean just necessarily being calm, cool, and collected. Sometimes it's showing a little excitement. Sometimes it's showing a little bit more enthusiasm, right? Sometimes it's dialing it down. So let's talk about context for this here. So here's these two students, correct? And one has rocked it on the mimic simulation. You can see him there in the red. He's rocked it. He's done a great job on the mimic simulation. And the other student on the left-hand side, not really enthused about using the mimic simulation per se, although everyone should be enthused. But in this particular response, you yourself have to regulate your emotions. Now, let's say you got a promotion that one day. You found out you made it to full professor, correct? Or you just finished your doctoral dissertation. So when you're meeting with the student on the right in the red, with the red background, you're like, you're right on board with his emotions, right? You're both giving high fives to each other and so forth, right? But with the student on the left, you may be in a state of heightened emotional response, but you may have to dial it down to be able to relate more with that particular student. So that's what we mean by being kind of like a thermostat. You be able to dial it down so that you can relate a little bit better, because you're on cloud nine, your student is not really there, and you need to be able to tap into that. Or, you've had a great day, but you come home to your wife, and your wife has had a horrible day, right? And so you'd have to like calm down your emotions so that you can be able to relate with your wife and have a great conversation, hopefully, about what has gone on in her day and help her out and be there for her. Okay, so this is kind of the whole idea here behind being a thermostat and a thermometer. And I want to also kind of like mention here some assignments or project ideas that kind of tap into this a little bit more. So one is to ask students to respond to negative consumer reviews. How would they do that? To actually put themselves in the shoes of the business owner and to respond to some rather heavy critique type of negative consumer reviews. How would they do that? Next is, and this one is pretty important here, and I simulate this a lot in my business communication class. I actually ask them really tough questions, and I simulate basically a sales or client proposal rejection in the class. So they've gone through this proposal, they've presented it in front of class, and all of a sudden I'll just say, I don't think this is a good fit for our organization. Just something like that. I see how do they respond. Not only the professional response, but how do they manage their emotions in that particular case, right? And I think when we come to kind of like rating presentations, we not only need to rate the presentations on the content presented and the level of detail presented within the content, but are they expressing that enthusiasm? Are they able to really connect with the audience and express their emotions as well? And because people, as you guys know, within marketing, right, emotion sells. That's what we tap into, right? It's that emotion. So are we creating those opportunities where students can further express their emotions outside the phone sometimes? Sometimes it's just within the phone that they do it, but actually outside the phone and on an interpersonal level. Okay, so now we've got these components. So we got self-awareness, self-management. Now we're going to social awareness here. And so social awareness is the ability to recognize and identify emotions in others. And this is a very important component right here, especially when it comes to relationship management. And so we want to kind of be able to really look at social awareness. And the number one key skill to develop is empathy. And a lot of people confuse empathy for sympathy. And I want to delineate these two concepts here for us today, because it's very important to delineate them. Okay. So empathy is the ability to relate to how a person feels. I feel with the person. Sympathy is I feel for the person. I feel bad for you. I feel sorry for you. And so we want to be able to really have more of an empathetic response, not a sympathetic response. Okay. So empathy is not sympathy. That's definite. And the one key example here, and just to kind of highlight that framework, is you feel with the person, empathy. Sympathy, you feel for the person. So let's look at a situation here. A student comes to you, okay, or even a colleague or somebody you're helping out and says, I'm really nervous about this presentation. An empathetic response would be, you sound concerned and worried about this presentation. What's making you nervous, right? You're trying to relate with them. You're trying to see what the problem is and why do they feel that way. A sympathetic response is, hey, it's no problem. You got this. No need to worry. You talk for a living, right? as a professor, you probably hear that phrase quite a bit. You talk for a living, correct? So, be able to empathize with your students, be able to empathize with your clients, be able to empathize with customers, correct? That's a key skill for anyone in marketing, whether you're in sales or whether you're developing consumer personas, whatever it is. That's a key skill, right? We want to be able to empathize and relate and see where a person is coming from. It's a key skill. So that helps us develop our social awareness right there. Empathy is a key cornerstone for that. All right, so what can you do to develop this? One is you can pair up students to discuss a horrible or delightful customer service experience, for example, right? And actually have the students ask follow-up questions on how that particular student felt in that customer service experience. We've all had a bad customer service experience, perhaps, right? Discuss that. Tell me how you felt. Dig into that a little bit more. And at this point, just relate to it, right? Just focus on relating to it. The other type of assignment or idea here is to ask students to identify emotional statements in product reviews. What terms, emojis, are customers using to relate how they feel about the products that they purchased, and which reviews kind of seem genuine here. And again, it's being able to kind of get into that whole aspect of empathy and being able to develop an idea about how people are feeling and being able to relate to that directly. So in your response, when students respond to a bad customer review, are they empathizing first, then offering a solution, right? That's very important component right there in developing a great effective solution is, are they showing empathy first, then providing a solution to the customer? That, I think that's missing a lot these days. All right. Last but not least, we'll talk about here is a social management, and that is the ability to develop healthy relationships through self-awareness, self-management, and social awareness. And actually, you kind of need to have all of these three components in place. You need to be able to know how you feel about the issue, how other people are feeling about the issue. Then you can talk about the response you will have and how you'll develop that relationship. Okay, so this comes to the last one right here, which is self-management. And so when we talk about self-management, one strategy that I'll share here, and there are multiple strategies for each one of these. So I'm just highlighting one strategy given the time that we have here in this session. But one strategy is to look at communication styles, right? how do your students, or how do you relate, or how do you communicate with others? And that communication develops relationships and the basis for relationships. So if we look at this more closely right here, of course, we have different types of communication styles, right? There's passive, just keep quiet about everything. There's aggressive, which is my way or the highway. Passive aggressive, which is you keep quiet about some things, but you may talk or spread some rumors behind the scenes, correct? Or right around the water cooler. And then assertive. Assertive is great. We want to get our students to become more assertive in their communication. And that is not to shy away from telling somebody how you feel about a topic or an issue. And that's very important, especially when it comes to making serious decisions in an organization. If you have reservations about the strategy, are you communicating those reservations in a way that tells people how you feel? And you are entitled to how you feel. No one can take that away from you. You are entitled to how you feel. So assertive is really what we want to focus on, right? I get annoyed when you interrupt me while I'm on the phone. Okay, now this is a simple example, correct? But I have some reservations about the strategy and direction that this company is going into. And here's why, right? But it's being able to express that. And then people know then that it is really a serious issue, right? And they're able to relate with you better because you've expressed how you feel about it in a professional manner. Now, in certain cases, what we'd like to do here is look at the communication styles that students themselves use, and especially when they use them with their teammates, right? What's the predominant style of communication used within the group? So to kind of like get an awareness of that and to look at how those relationships are being developed, because relationships are based on communication. So how is the communication occurring within the group environment? When should students emphasize certain communication styles? Sometimes, maybe perhaps they become a little bit more passive when they don't know much about the issue or the topic, but they can become slightly more aggressive when there's an injustice, when there's something wrong that happens, right? They don't have to be overly aggressive or something like that, but when there's a slight injustice occurring, maybe a little bit more aggressive or having a little bit more of an assertive style would be good. Right. And then last but not least, also provide an overview of the team formation model, which is Bruce Tuckman's model of formation, right? Forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Those are the stages of team development that occur within any team. And what I tell students hate, I use the word hate, and I'll see if you guys can concur with me. Students hate a lot of teamwork. But you got to do it, right? And we know that's a key to success when it comes to any type of endeavor, especially in the professional world. We work as a team, and we work in teams, correct? So this is an important skill to develop. Well, people hate, or students hate a lot of times working in teams. And when I describe this model to them and tell them, hey, look, you know what? There's a stage in which you'll be coming together as a group. Then you will talk about how you're going to get the work done, right? And what work you're supposed to do. And you're going to have differences, and that's in the storming stage. And I describe all of these stages, and then they now know that, you know what, we're going to get past this point where it's going to be me against them or us against each other, or we're having conflicts within the group. We're going to get past that point, and we're going to get the point to where we can norm, perform, and finally like come together as a team. So when they know those stages and they know what kind of issues occur within those stages, they can better anticipate a better team performance going forth. All right. I want to leave you finally with this last couple quotes here to talk about emotional intelligence. And this is a quote directly from Daniel Goldman, and he says this: I would say that IQ is the strongest predictor of which field you can get into and hold a job in, whether you can be an accountant, lawyer, or a nurse, for example. IQ can show whether you have the cognitive capacity to handle the information and complexities you face in a particular field. But once you are in that field, emotional intelligence emerges as a much stronger predictor of who will be most successful, because it is how we handle ourselves in our relationships that determine how well we do once we are in a given job. And then I also wanted to quote Aristotle, and I think this speaks to emotional intelligence from a slightly different perspective. And he says this: anybody can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, and to the right degree, and at the right time, and for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power, and that is not easy. And finally, I would love to end with one more particular quote here, and it's by the inspiration of my life. This is my dad, Dr. Abdul Sinno, and he says this: at times when all looks dark, remember that hope is stronger than despair, and courage can replace fear. And all of these are inside of you, and they are all switchable. And is just he's such an inspiration to me. So, and I believe it really speaks to the whole notion of emotional intelligence, is that all of this exists within inside of us. We can choose, we can become more aware, and we can manage ourselves so that we can be the best that we can be towards ourselves and towards others and the people that we serve. Last but not least, at the end here, I also wanted to provide you with resources or links where you can further explore emotional intelligence, including the original article itself on emotional intelligence by Peter Salovey and John Mayer. I also included a link to a free EQ test that you can take. This is by Harvard Business Review. You can go through and take that particular test, and from the resources that I've reviewed, it seems like at least it gives you a pulse, at least, as to what your emotional intelligence is. I will also show you here a book, and I'm not sure if how's that coming across on the webcam right here, but it's Emotional Intelligence 2.0. This is a great book, and with the book comes a free assessment that you can take as well. And if you want to look a little bit more about the different types of assessments that there are on EQ and the validity of those assessments and so forth, you can go to this link right here. Measuring EQ is by the EI Consortium. They talk in depth and in detail about all of the different types of assessments and their validity and the research behind them. I'll also point you to those in higher education and even high school teachers here. I would also point you to CASEL, where you can look at more resources for education organizations to implement emotional intelligence. And then the final resource as well, which is more of a consortium on the research and the current undergoings of emotional intelligence, is the EI Consortium, where you can use that as well. Okay. And so that brings me to the end of the presentation, and I'd be glad to take any questions at this point in time.
Rafic, thank you so much. That was excellent. Couple of questions. Someone asked, how can we assess a student's emotions virtually? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, the easiest, most accessible way, I would say, is, the free test that I showed you here on the slide by Harvard Business Review, and I can make these slides available, or Stu can make these slides available. The other way, actually, is have them get this book. It's like $26, and it comes with a free assessment. And that they can take that right away. They can take it virtually, and they can get their score. What's great about this book, too, is that it goes into each area, and it gives them a score, and then they can go, based on their score, they can go to the area they have to improve, and they can see a number of different strategies that help them improve in that specific area. So I would say that's a most accessible way for students to get this. Otherwise, if you were to go to more of the official EQ tests and so forth, you'd have to go through Daniel Goleman's EI Institute, and then they would institute it more on an organizational level to do that kind of formal assessment.
Awesome. And that was emotional. Can you read the title?
Yes. Yes, there we go. Stuart has it right there in the comments. Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Yes.
Thank you.
It is a wonderful, wonderful short read, very accessible. I've used this in a number of my classes, and students really love it.
Great. Jim Simmons has, he's asking for some advice. He had a particularly challenging class where students tend to preface assignment questions with, "Do we have to?" And then there was a lot of eye rolling and sort of frustration with the answer. And he said this wasn't just one or two students, it seemed to be the whole class. And he wanted advice on how to handle a situation like that.
I would say, you can open it up for dialogue at this point. Get their feeling on it. Really ask them, why are you feeling this way about this assignment? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And I think when you get that eye rolling and things like that, the thing that they expect you to do as an instructor is say, well, you got to do it. Well, we know eventually they have to do the assignment and so forth, but giving them a space to kind of like talk about that and say, really tell me, what are your main concerns about this assignment? Well, why do you feel, why are you feeling this way? I noticed that certain people here are reacting negatively towards the assignment itself. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? You're right. Just having a safe space to talk about that and say, I'd like to discuss this with you for the next 5 minutes, so it doesn't go on and on, right? But at least you give them the space to give you some kind of correspondence, and they see, oh, well, he cares or she cares about this. So I think being able to have that approach, it takes, as you as a professor, it takes a little bit of courage to have that approach, right? Because you're opening things up a bit. But I think you'll find that it works in your favor long term. And then remind them of the purpose of the assignment, and then remind them how it helps build their skills forward, right? And remind them how it fits into the overall picture. And I think that also helps them put things in perspective as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Another comment we had earlier was about how do we develop greater empathy during some of these high stress situations like the pandemic and other things going on in the nation where we're feeling emotionally drained. How do we express more empathy for our students?
I would say, reach out to your students and say, given the events that are ongoing, I wanted to check in with you guys. I wanted to see how everyone's doing, how is everyone's feeling. If you need me to, if you want to talk about this, I'd be just willing to listen, and just promise them that you have no answers, no solutions, but you are just there to really listen to them. And I think people take comfort in that, because oftentimes they know there's no real solution. They just want somebody to be there to listen to them and to relate with them. And that's an important thing that we need to be there for our students as professors. So the approach to doing that and being open just to listen to them and letting them know that you're willing to listen to them goes a long way in establishing that, and letting them know how you feel. But by the way, and that's very important, because people don't normally disclose their emotions unless you're willing to be vulnerable too. And that's an important component of emotional intelligence. Like I said, sometimes we tell people, "Oh, everything's going well," when it's really not. And we have to be willing to be vulnerable and let our students know that how we feel about things, is for them to respond. And when they see that in you, because remember, you are the leader, you are the person who's the head of the classroom at this point. You facilitate a great educational experience for them. Be vulnerable. Show them you care. Don't be afraid to shed a tear. And you keep it professional, but at the same time, you express how you feel. So it depends on your comfort as a professor. I've seen some professors who are very comfortable in expressing their emotions. I see some that are not really comfortable in doing that, and that's not their style. But I think in some kind of way to do it in a constructive manner, wherein you can show them how much you care, is very important. So find it within your style, and eventually, as you become more comfortable with it, I believe you'll be able to disclose more.
That's great. We had a question about how do we show greater self awareness or empathy when responding virtually on things like discussion boards? Sometimes people's tones can be misinterpreted.
Yeah, so I think to follow up with the question, perhaps a little bit more context, but I will kind of fill in the blank at this point. I think in a way where you read like a discussion response and it seems a little snarky, perhaps, or a little off base, you can respond and say, I always say. I always start with thanking them for sharing their opinion. Thank you for your input on this particular question. From your response, I can see that you have these concerns, or that you may be taking this point a little lightly. Could you reflect on that a little bit with me, or could you please provide further details on that? Right. So it's being able to tap into that. But I would say always start with gratitude and thanks. That always helps build the relation, regardless of the response that they give, regardless if it's negative, positive. Always start with thanks, and then delve into the issues and unpack them there.
Very good. We had another question. How do you balance empathy without having students take advantage of a situation?
Well, I think from the definition of empathy, empathy is being able to relate to how others feel. It's really about creating that safe space in the classroom. And so, what I kind of preface a lot of my conversations in the classroom with is I say, what we're going to do is establish a safe space here in this classroom where people can really share how they feel about a topic or issue. And this is how they feel, and they are entitled to how they feel, right? And we need to respect that. In order for you to share how you feel, you need to feel that other people within this class respect that too. I want you to know these are the ground rules for how we will conduct these conversations in this class, or how we'll talk about sensitive issues within this class. Because you cannot talk about these sensitive issues without a respectful environment. And, any sort of disrespect or a comment that is very, very disrespectful is something that is not tolerated here within this class. And just to let them know, those are the ground rules. But you have to preface the conversation with that. You have to establish a safe space for them to be able to share their emotions and feel that they will be respected. And so, you might start with an example, and let them know how you feel about an issue. And somebody may not necessarily agree with your standpoint or how you feel, and that's okay. And that's completely fine. And then let them share how they feel about the issue itself, and you can play out a scenario within the class and kind of like model that in front of them. Okay. And maybe have a student participate in that, and let that student know in advance, this is an exercise that you're going to simulate here in front of the class to show what a respectful environment looks like. So I think just having that safe space and that respectful environment and leading with those ground rules is critical to establishing an environment that is conducive to people sharing their emotions and how they feel about the issues.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Rafic. We're running out of time before our next session, so we're not going to be able to answer any more questions, but this was, I think, an excellent session for everyone who listened, whether you're a professor, a professional, anyone. This benefited us all. So thank you so much for your time and your effort in this presentation.
Thank you, guys, and we're in such good company, and I'm just proud to be a part of this conference, and so privileged to share this information with you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Thanks, Rafic.
Thank you.